All right, we are back on Sports Bit Betting Insight today, Wednesday, December 28th. Pauly and Teddy, big game breakdown, rapid fire, 5 more bowl games, plus play of the day. We'll get to early line moves and how to treat Week 17 in the NFL. Another coach fired, all that coming up. And we start with the Dogs continue to get the money, and the Dogs are barking. And they've been the big story of this bowl season, Teddy. You're talking about teams, the favorites laying 7.5 or higher. You're talking 1-8 ATS with some outright wins by these Dogs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Colorado State loses outright to Idaho. Yesterday, we saw Wake Forest beat Temple in outright fashion. Minnesota beating Washington State in outright fashion, one of the uglier bowl games you'll ever watch. But it's not just the straight-up wins. Army doesn't cover against North Texas, and Mississippi State doesn't cover against Miami-O, and BYU doesn't cover against Wyoming, and La Tech doesn't cover against Navy, and New Mexico doesn't cover against San Antonio, and on down the line. Right now, we're talking about 1-8 ATS for those bowl favorites of more than a touchdown.
Yes.
Without a doubt, that has been the story so far here in bowl season.
Have to keep riding that. You can't look at favorites when this run is so strong.
Well, one game is not necessarily going to have anything to do with the next game. And as we go through bowl season, what you see is in the early bowl games, you have a lot of lousy teams on both sides. As we get later and later in the bowl season, you have better teams on both sides. Therefore, the favorites less weak and more motivated. So I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you necessarily want to say, oh, this is what has already happened, therefore I want to bet it exactly that way moving forward. This is what's happened, and I wouldn't argue with a couple of dogs. We'll talk about one over the course of the next couple of days when we do our big game breakdown that I certainly think is live as a double-digit underdog. But to say, now that this trend has already hit 90% in bowl season, let's start betting it now? You should
No, keep betting it. No. I keep betting it. I'm not going to say don't be the guy. Well, the favorite's got to win some of these games. Don't be that guy.
Yes, that much I agree.
All right. 2 bad bets from the same game. Army bet up to 11 against North Texas in the one rematch, and the total bet down to 47. Both were wrong. And North Texas with a backup quarterback who got in there and moved the ball against Army.
Yeah, well, I mean, Army's defense is not known for shutting down many passing attack. I mean, Alec Morris came in at quarterback for North Texas. He's the ultimate journeyman senior. Ended up throwing for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Black Knights get the win, but they never even sniff the point spread cover.
Oh, and Jimmy Vaccaro talked about this a couple weeks ago. At the South Point, they took a $50,000 bet on Temple. Here at William Hill, they took a $44,000 bet on Temple. Both guys laid 13. Never a shot. Wake Forest with the outright win.
Yeah, I guess Wake can score when nobody has the plays that they run.
Yes.
But I mean, Temple in a situation where they're playing, at a venue they just played, a cold weather venue, an early start game, an opponent they're not particularly excited about facing. Their coach is gone. Yeah, it wasn't Temple's A game, and Wake proved that pretty early in that one.
Yeah, that was that was bad. 2 bad bets there when you talk with those guys late and what the line went off at. Bad for the books was Wake, that was bet down to 10.5, Teddy.
Yeah, and nothing but Wake, in terms of the sharp money, nothing but Wake Forest money in that contest. I mean, the market's new. Again, without a head coach, nondescript, early start, cold weather bowl game in a decidedly unsexy venue.
Yep.
Temple didn't bring their A game. The markets knew it, and they were right.
Bad for the books continues. A couple games in the association. No Conley, no Parsons for the Grizzlies. Money came in on the Celtics, and no Dragic for the Heat. Thunder with a blowout win.
Yeah, Celtics get bet up from 6.5 to 7.5 after Conley and Parsons were ruled out for Memphis. That was the second night of back-to-backs for the Grizzlies as well. The books kind of got lucky in this one. It was a 4-point game with just over a minute to play, but Memphis didn't score again. A 6-0 closeout from Boston in that one. And OKC, -2 up to -4.5 at Miami. Westbrook, he had his triple-double by early in the third. No Dragic for the Heat. They certainly missed him last night.
NFL Week 17 line moves in a second. Another coach fired. Rex and Rob, get out. It was a horrible performance by both guys with the defense and what Rex did on Saturday. It's an overtime. A tie is just like a loss. It's 4th and 2. He punched the ball with 4 minutes left. Yeah. That was atrocious. You talked about this Monday show. They had 10 guys on the field when Ajayi ripped off one of their big runs. They were only the third team in NFL history to allow 3 200-yard rushers in the same season. The defense stunk. The timeout too late on the 55-yard field goal by Franks. It is since the back-to-back AFC title runs with the Jets. That is 6 straight non-winning seasons for Rex Ryan.
Yeah, Rex Ryan will never be an NFL head coach again. Meanwhile, the money's pouring in on the New York Jets, which is a scary thought. The Bills bet from -6 down to -3.5. Market's not exactly excited about Anthony Lynn as the interim head coach. He's been Buffalo's offensive coordinator this season. And, of course, Tyrod Taylor is expected to sit for E.J. Manuel as well. So, hard for me to get to the window betting the Jets in a game where they have to be competitive in order to cover the point spread. But the markets are doing that just now, not expecting an A-level performance from the Bills in their meaningless season finale.
Because you have to win doesn't mean you're going to win. Giants in D.C., Redskins win, they're in. Giants locked into the 5 seed. The Redskins bet up from 5 to 8 in this one.
Well, exactly. I mean, what you're going to see is the markets react to must-win scenarios, even when it comes to seeding issues. And I'll tell you, there's something to be said for betting on a team that has to win a game versus an opponent that doesn't in a meaningless contest. But when you start talking about, they're going to be motivated to finish as a 4 seed instead of the 5 seed, none of that, in my mind, has ever been true. The markets sometimes reacted at will. Redskins, they got everything to play for. Giants have nothing to play for, but you're not getting any bargains right now. Big 3-point move on Washington. We'll probably see more Redskins money before this week is done.
They're back at Doug Marrone again. Jacksonville taking money, and the Bears taking money against the Vikings. Dysfunctional Vikings.
Yeah. The Jags +7 all the way down to +4.5 at Indy. I think we're seeing pro-Marrone money for the Jaguars and anti-Colts money. The market's not looking for Indy to bring their A game here. And, of course, I can understand why the money's come against Minnesota. -6.5 down to -5 against the Bears. When you have veterans on the Vikings come after the game in the presser and say, yeah, we're ignoring the coach's instructions, that is a red flag for a team laying that type of a price. And again, it's a type of story where Chicago, they're still playing hard. Minnesota, not so much. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that line get bet down even further.
And this line is all over the place. Cowboys on the road to take on the Eagles. Jerry Jones came out yesterday and said, nope, not a good idea to play Romo.
Yeah, and Dallas was -3.5 on the look-ahead line. Let's put it that way. Philly opened as high as -6.5, the 5-dimes opener. The market's now settling in with the Eagles in that 4.5 point range. But Dallas is saying they're going to play their starters, but will those guys be there after halftime? That's another question entirely. So we'll talk about the implications for this when it comes to season win totals when we do our season win total review on tomorrow's Sports Bet. You better be back here watching that show. It's every bit as good as this one, maybe even better.
So you're telling me there's a chance the Buccaneers need a 9-team parlay. They need a Redskin tie to just one of the things they need to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, the ESPN odds said it was 60,000 to 1. I don't agree with their assessment on some of these teams when it comes to their percentage chances of winning. But yeah, we're talking about a 9-teamer in the 60,000 to 1 range. But what's happening? Tampa must win. -3.5 up to -6 against Carolina. Markets expecting a no-show from the Panthers in their finale.
All right, look at this. The big move in the Steeler game.
Yeah, Pittsburgh was as high as -12.5. Now they're down to -5.5 against the Browns. Guess who's expected to rest starters? It's not Cleveland.
Yeah, and Patriots taking a lot of money, up to 9.5. If they beat the Dolphins, they are the 1 seed. Miami can still try to improve their seed, although they're already in the playoffs.
Well, Miami can't do better than the 5. I'm almost positive they're locked into that number 5 seed, Paul.
No, not true.
What do you got on that? Because we're having a discussion off air. The Dolphins are going to be the wild card. They can't win the division, which means they're either the 5 or the 6. It doesn't make a difference if you're the 5 or the 6 seed. Not a whole lot of difference. You're still going on the road.
Oh, wait a second now. Wait a second. I as opposed to going to Pittsburgh or playing Tom Savage?
For a team in their preparation, I understand. We say, you'd rather be the 5 seed so you could avoid the Steelers. First of all, Steelers got to win Actually, the Steelers are really locked into that 3.
They're locked into the 3.
They're locked into the 3. But when you say, oh, would you rather go here and play or they'll go there and play? Of course, it's an easier game. The points would be lower against Houston. When it comes to actually motivating a team to play differently, I've never seen any of that stuff have any effect. Never.
What's with this Rams game?
I don't know. I mean, they're betting on L.A. again. You know, they didn't lose enough with the Rams last week. Plus 7.5 down to plus 6. I think it's anti-Zona money. I can't imagine it's pro-Rams money, but there's a couple of groups out there that clearly like L.A. Again, they have yet to learn their lesson.
In AFC West, Chiefs need a win and a Raider loss to get the bye and win the division. Chiefs taking money, and how about this? They opened up Denver a 3.5-point favorite against the Raiders, and the Broncos are a mess right now. We talked about the bickering, but it also might be Paxton Lynch at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos are 2-5 in their last 7 ball games. The 2 wins that they have, well, remember that game against New Orleans that they lost, but then got the 2-point conversion to ran it back at the end of the game to win? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Yes. So that's one of the 2 wins they've had in the last 7 weeks, a game that they lost and got extremely lucky. The other win came against Jacksonville. And I'll tell you what, the Jags beat themselves that game. Denver gets credit for the W. It was Blake Bortles at his absolute worst. So that's it for Denver W's over the last 2 months. No surprise, we've seen a little bit of Oakland money already. May well see more with Matt McGloin as the starter.
How do you attack Week 17? Is it better or worse than the preseason?
Worse, because the preseason, the coaches will tell you what they want to do.
Yes.
You know, and then the coaches will give you their game plan. Week 17 for me is literally a situation where you're digging for any little edge you find. The markets react very quickly, as we just went through this whole list of line moves with the markets jumping all over the place. But what I'm interested in the most Week 17 is dogs that on paper don't look like they have a lot to play for, but all the quotes coming out of the locker room are saying, hey, we're going to give it our best shot this week. Those are the teams I want Week 17, not the must-win teams, the teams going against the must-win teams that are playing hard and catching an extra field goal because the markets are overreacting.
Up next, big game breakdown, 5 bowl games. We'll go rapid fire and then the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRpicks.com.
That's right, the 8th annual SBR Forum Bash will be held at the breathtaking all-inclusive Hard Rock Hotel in Punta Cana on Super Bowl weekend. Join Natalie Rydstrom and the Odds Couple as they mingle with SBR pros and have fun under the sun. Stay tuned for video coverage of Bash activities, including a $5,000 poker tournament sponsored by uwager.eu. Only on SBR, your sportsbook authority since 1999.
Back on SportsBit, Betting Insight today. Time for big game breakdown. As always, live on sportsbookreview.com. First up today, Russell Athletic Bowl. West Virginia against Miami from Orlando, 2:30 Pacific. Miami is 2.5, 57 the total. A lot of suspensions for Miami, but most of the guys hardly saw any playing time. The key points here. West Virginia D, great at stopping Big 12 spread offenses. We've talked about their defense and Gibson doing a great job as defensive coordinator. But Miami runs a pro-style attack, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about all the great offenses that West Virginia shut down this year, they shut down Texas Tech. They did a decent job. Oklahoma was the one team that kind of ripped them apart. But, I guess Oklahoma State kind of ripped them apart too. But, the Texas offense did a nice job against, and the Baylor offense did a nice job, and on down the line. There's so many of these Big 12 spread offenses, and the Mountaineer D in that unique 3-3-5 style was well suited and played those spread attacks as well as any defense in college football this year. But that's not what Miami runs. So the question now, is it defensive talent for West Virginia? Or is it a schematic issue for the Mountaineers that isn't going to have that type of an edge against the Miami Hurricanes? That's then one of the key handicapping points for this one.
Miami kind of had a unique season. They got up to the great start, stumbled in the middle, and then closed strong.
Well, yeah, I mean, 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread. Down the stretch of the campaign. And, we have a first-year head coach in Mark Richt, who is, I always like the first-year coaches getting to take advantage of the extra practice time, install more, get players more comfortable with what they're doing. And, of course, when it comes to the quarterback battle in this matchup, we got Brad Kaya on the one side and Skyler Howard on the other. Both guys have inconsistency issues, but Howard had more of them, man. When he was off, he was way off, and West Virginia stunk. When Kaya was off, the Hurricanes could still run the football a little bit. And if you ask me who are these two QBs I trust more in a bowl game, it'd be Brad Kaya over Skyler Howard.
Okay, I'll agree with that. Are you surprised at the line when you talk about a good West Virginia defense and a team that lost in bad weather at home against Oklahoma, one of the hottest teams in the country, and then they lost in Stillwater? No shame there.
Yeah, but when you look at the wins over both teams for West Virginia, you're not going to be that impressed. They had a 1-point win against Kansas State. That game was a, coin flip. They had a 3-point win against BYU. And remember, there was a bad spot for BYU. Nobody liked BYU that week. That was a coin flip. And they had the one dominant effort against TCU, frankly, wasn't very good this year. The overall strength of schedule numbers show these two teams are very even. The overall quarterback numbers show that these two teams are very even. The overall stats, both for offense and defense, show that these two teams are very even. Yet, I think those stats lie a little bit, especially with the strength of schedule-wise. I really do think the Hurricanes played a tougher slate of opponents than West Virginia this year. And I think that shows up in the bowl game this afternoon.
All right, very good. Next game, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Foster Farms Bowl from Levi Stadium, 5:30 Pacific on Fox Television. Utah, Indiana, Utah 7, 54.5. The total, big prep edge to Utah and Kyle Whittingham. 9-1 straight up and 8-2 ATS in the bowls. And with Indiana, Wilson fired, Teddy.
Yeah, well, Wilson resigned officially. And in some ways, we would expect the transition to Tom Allen to be fairly seamless. But, and maybe he ends up being an upgrade long term. I don't know that there are many assistants had a bigger impact than Tom Allen this season. Look at South Florida. Okay, Tom Allen was the South Florida defense coordinator last year. That defense was great. This year, way down. Indiana's defense, a disaster. Every season, Indiana's defense has been a disaster. This year, they improved in every major defensive category. They shaved off more than 10 points per game. They shaved off more than 135 yards per game versus what they allowed in 2015. It's an Indiana defense that was really good. That was pretty good, but definitely underrated throughout the course of the campaign. And a lot of that has to do with Tom Allen. But it's his first season at Indiana. He's never been a head coach at any level. And while there were certainly things that we didn't like about Kevin Wilson, you're not getting any bargains betting against the Hoosiers in this ballgame, given their Whittingham's success. You talked about that 9-1 straight up, 8-2 ATS in bowls. That's factored into this point spread, as is the fact that Indiana lost their head coach between the end of the regular season and the start of bowl season.
Utah had an unusual season as well. Remember, Joe Williams, our running back, retired, and then came back, and then he had an unbelievable season and really took off and helped this Utah offense. And we talked about it many times here on SportsBit.
Well, yeah, and that was the entirety of the offense. The one big difference between Indiana and Utah, Utah didn't turn the ball over. They certainly had a quarterback, Troy Williams. He's a junior, played at Washington in 2014. He only threw 7 interceptions, was a decent running back. Running back out of the backfield. But when you look at the plays that Williams was able to make versus what we see on the Indiana side, the Hoosiers gained over 5,000 yards, but they had so many. Richard Lego, INTs, what do you have? I think 16 on the campaign, and they all seem to come at bad times where the point spread's on the line, the game's on the line. I trust Utah's quarterback more. I trust Utah's running back more, but let's not forget Utah's punter. The ability to flip the field, the ability to dominate the field position battle. That matters. Mitch Wishnowsky ranked number 1 in all of college football in net punting. Some of that may have to do with the mile high air in Salt Lake City, but this type of game we would expect the Utes to win the field position battle.
One more before we break. Live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Also today, Texas Bowl, NRG Stadium in Houston. 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. Texas A&M 2.5, 57.5 against Kansas State. A lot of people think the wrong team's favored in this one, and as good as Whittingham's been, ATS and straight up in the bowls, Snyder's been the opposite. Go back to 2009, he's 1-5 straight up in ATS in bowl games.
Yeah, and there's talk that, Snyder's 77 years old now. He retired from Kansas State a decade ago and then came back and took the job again. There's talk that he may hang it up again, this time for good, after this ball game. Although that is not confirmed, that is all rumor, etc., etc. So it's a K-State team that's been really good in the underdog role. And when I say really good, I mean really good, both short and a long term. We're talking about a squad that I've got them at close to 70% ATS catching points, and this year 5-1 against the number catching point. 27-13. That's the long term. Their last 40 as a dog under Snyder, so not quite 70%, 67.5. 5-1 as a dog this season. The only non-cover came against Oklahoma, and that was a game in which Hubener got off the bench. Both teams have backup QB Hubeners here, and if you see either one of them, that team's not going to cover the point spread in this contest. So K-State with a bad bowl record, K-State with the good record as a dog. You got to pick your poison if you're looking at trends between those two.
How's Trevor Knight?
Well, for much of the season, the Oklahoma transfer, he had shoulder issues all year. He had accuracy problems all year. But the reports coming out of College Station heading into the bowl game were positive. Look, he only completed, 52% of his passes. 16 touchdowns versus 6 INTs. And he really wasn't chucking it deep. It was a lot of dink and dunk. What Knight did best, he ran the football. That dual threat. Close to 600 rushing yards, more than 6 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns on the ground. But K-State's got a pretty good running quarterback of their own in Ertz, who was, he's the entirety of the offense. The guy who, again, not a great downfield thrower. Kansas State is not going to be explosive offensively. And this is a game where side and total could be related. If you like the Wildcats plus the points, you don't want this game to be a shootout. K-State's not winning shootouts and not covering shootouts. They don't have the playmakers like, Travion Williams for A&M or Christian Kirk for A&M or Josh Reynolds for A&M. And when you talk about defensive playmakers, they don't have anybody that's like Myles Garrett, the most likely to be the first player taken in the NFL draft.
Very good. Up next, the Birmingham and the Belk Bowl, plus the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
We continue on SportsBit. Betting insight today, Pauly and Teddy. Follow us on Twitter at Pauly Howard at Teddy_covers. Thursday, Birmingham Bowl, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 Pacific. South Florida and South Carolina. South Florida 10, 62 the total. Look at now, the SEC had a bad year, and they're not off to a good start in the bowl games as well. But an SEC team catching double digits here, Teddy, and another coach that left, Taggart, takes the Oregon job.
Well, that's just it. You have a coach that just left, and it's not a disastrous situation for the interim. You have T.J. Weiss, who was the co-offensive coordinator. He was in charge of the passing game and the wide receivers. He'll serve as the interim head coach here in Birmingham before Charlie Strong takes over following the ball game after Taggart, as you mentioned, left. So you have a team. They had a real good year, South Florida. They had 14 starters returning. They suffered only 2 losses. And the 2 losses, they lost to the juggernaut Florida State. They lost to the league champ Temple. Nothing to be shy in either of those defeats. The offense, 42 points a game, close to 300 yards per game on the ground. You have a dual threat quarterback in Quentin Flowers, the AAC Offensive Player of the Year, number 10 in the nation in a total offense. And you got the running back in Marlon Mack, who averaged better than 7 yards per carry this season. So all this stuff, again, factored into the number. That's why we're talking about USF laying this type of a price against an SEC team. The question, of course, as we talked about at the top of the show, with so many of the bigger favorites falling in early season play, is this another potential upset possibility, or at least a chance for South Carolina to hang tough?
Well, can they move the ball and score points? The offense was atrocious for much of the season.
Well, the Bulls' defense is pretty atrocious. They gave up 31 points a game. They gave up close to 5 yards per carry. They ranked 120th nationally in total defense, giving up more than 480 yards per game. And look, South Carolina's offense stunk all year. It got a little bit better, more than a little bit better. It got better once he put the Frost Jake Bentley in. You know, they were going to keep the red shirt on him, and they just had to take the red shirt off. He finished, 6 touchdown passes, 63% completions. But we're talking about a freshman QB getting 3 weeks of practice. It makes a difference. And of course, it was Bentley who, this guy who skipped his senior year of high school. He was the guy who was in charge when they pulled the upset over Tennessee, 15-20 in that game with a couple of touchdowns.
All right, last game, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Belk Bowl. Oh, always bad for the people at Duke and at Belk Bowl when you hear that name. This is Thursday night, 5:30 Pacific. 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 East Coast. Virginia Tech against Arkansas. Virginia Tech is 7-61 the total. Contrasting styles here. Arkansas, ground and pound, run the ball. Virginia Tech at times, high octane, let's move it, let's throw it, let's score. But two very inconsistent teams, Teddy.
Yeah, and again, we think about Arkansas as this ground and pound type of team. This year's offense was much more balanced. The 17 rushing touchdowns, 21 pass touchdowns, for example. The junior quarterback, Austin Allen, I think he's better than his brother. He finished second in the SEC in passing yards, second in the SEC in touchdown passes. He did have a problem with interceptions. Was tied for the league lead in the SEC in INTs. But, of course, we know this team could run the football. Raleigh Williams, had more than 1,300 yards on the ground. They can chuck it around. If Drew Morgan, Keon Hatcher, a couple guys who can stretch opposing defenses. But the biggest problem with Arkansas this year, man, that defense compared to last year, they were a lot worse. They gave up 3.6 yards per carry in 2015. They gave up 6.2 yards per carry this year. There's talk that Arkansas is going to switch to a base 3-4 defense next year. That's not going to help them for this bowl game.
And with Virginia Tech, they were at their best when they played in some of the biggest games. When they had their problems when they were taking a step down in class. So I expect to get their A game in this one. And what do you think of the job Fuente did in year one?
Real good. Yeah, I know. I mean, look, when you're replacing a legend, he came in and trying to fill Frank Beamer's shoes. That's impossible. And yet the Hokies go 9-4. They win the ACC Coastal. They gave Clemson a real battle in the ACC championship. And of course they retained Bud Foster, and the defense was largely the same. But at the same time, man, we saw that defense at times really struggle, Pauly. A handful of games where all of a sudden, and particularly away from home, you remember the second half of the Tennessee game or the Syracuse game? There were a handful of times this year where Virginia Tech's defense kind of fell apart, and that's my biggest concern here with them in this point spread range of a TD or more.
You want to give them a bonus game? Should we do the Alamo Bowl too, quick?
Yeah, sure. What do we got?
All right, Alamo Bowl. Also Thursday, 6 o'clock Pacific. Colorado 3, 62.5 the total against Oklahoma State. Colorado with a great season. McIntyre, coach of the year, but they lose Leavitt. The defensive coordinator did a great job turning around that defense. He leaves to take the Oregon job, and they're not happy with that as he stays in the conference but leaves the program. And a lot of talk will be about how good was the Pac-12 this year. Some people thought underrated, other people thought overrated. This will be a good test and a good matchup in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, see, this is a good game.
Yes.
Two good teams. Colorado, 11-38 straight up over the previous 4 seasons heading into this year. Their last bowl appearance, this is how long their last bowl appearance was. 2007 against Alabama. Oh, that was Nick Saban's first year on the job with the Crimson Tide. Now look, McIntyre, significant program turnaround at San Jose State. He did the same thing here at Colorado. Their 10-3 point spread mark, tied for the second best point spread record in the country. For most of the season, this team was an undervalued commodity, but I'm not so convinced they're an undervalued commodity here. We talk about a fairly pedestrian offense, a defense that's been great, but their weakness, all 3 losses, Washington, Michigan, USC. Their weakness came against teams with boatloads of athletic talent.
Ooh.
That's what Oklahoma State brings to the table.
Very good. We like Mason Rudolph, NFL-type quarterback, and also Washington. their stud wide receiver as well. You think they can move the ball in this one?
Yeah, I would expect. I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of defenses shut down Oklahoma State this year. You know, you have Justice Hill and Chris Carson, duo at running back, and averages just shy of 6 yards per carry. You talk about James Washington. I keep hearing his name mentioned in the same breath as Des Bryant, another Oklahoma State alumni who's having success at the NFL level. That's what James Washington is capable of doing. This guy averaged 19.5 yards per catch. And of course, the Cowboys, these are not bowl virgins. The bowl virgins are from Colorado. This is the 11th consecutive bowl game for Okie State. They got thumped last year, 48-20 by Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. It was ugly and embarrassing New Year's Day defeat. From the reports I've been reading, they have a little bit of redemption on their minds. I know I said the same thing about Colorado State, and that didn't play out. But from all indications, Oklahoma State is looking to have a different level of effort and performance this year than last year. They should have some giddy up in their step facing a team they can beat this time around.
Yes, all right, there it is. We squeeze in 6 games, and Thursday and Friday going to be hectic as well with more bowl games. The semifinals Saturday in college football and Week 17 in the NFL. We'll get to all the big games on the final 2 shows, plus the, as Teddy talked about earlier, the win total update to start the show tomorrow in the NFL. Money time, play of the day, 41-24 on the football season. Betting number 255, back to Oklahoma State, Colorado. We'll take the points with Oklahoma State +3. Washington is coming back for his senior year. Colorado's going to wish he turned pro. He's going to have a big game, and I think a high-scoring game that Oklahoma State gets the W. 255, Oklahoma State, +3. That's the play of the day. Long show, a lot of fun. We're back Thursday and Friday on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.